I got a really good story for you guys. So without any further ado, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. These three stories are all paranormal, and they are all extreme. So buckle up and get ready, because as of now, it's time to slip into his mind. Let's go. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, it was a very different time. And the sky and the atmosphere, they were just different. The sun was golden all day, like colors you see now only at sunrise and sunset. And the sunrise and sets were bold red. And you see the atmosphere was also tinged with this beautiful golden light. Now, rock music was forming and exciting. You had the Kinks, Animals, and David Clark 5. They were all special and innovative, and it was a beautiful time to experience. Now, during this time, my parents purchased our first house, and the only thing that separated our backyard from the U.S. Army's Rocky Mountain Arsenal was 100 yards of vacant lot, a train track, and a 2-lane highway. Now, the sky would always hang over and appear as this deep blue, but always with that golden tinge in the air. And I've often thought it was from atomic testing. I mean, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal was a place where the Army stored banned poisons and weapons like nerve gas. And they imported these exotic animals and monitored them to detect, sarin and other gas leaks. And it was a danger. And it was in the back of my mind, but, I realized it's not really something worth fretting over. And our neighbors were all friendly. And everybody communicated with everybody else, and we would all get together, and they would talk about strange occurrences that were happening in their own houses. So one morning, several neighbors were gathered around the house at the coffee table, which was a common urban ritual, and suddenly the wall cracked. And a 2x4 with nails flew out and stuck in the wall across the room, embedded with the nails in it like it had ripped out of the frame. Now, these type of events were witnessed and talked about by multiple people. Now, in my house, things were more normal, for the most part. When I would go to bed, I had my own room, and I would be terrorized night after night. You see, as soon as my parents went to bed, a parade of faces, disembodied heads would float out of the bottom of my closet, rising at an angle upwards, across the floor, then up over my bed and above my head, and then disappear through the wall above me. Now, the faces were of different people that I never met or didn't know. And the color of their skin varied from yellowish to green. And they mostly had these scowls or these unpleasant expressions on their faces, and they were actually both male and female. You gotta understand, this would absolutely paralyze me with fear, but I would try to scream and nothing would come out. And for the longest time, I would try to muster up all my strength and just let out this little shriek and run stumbling with my legs like rubber into my parents' room, and I'd wake up my folks, and of course they were not amused or sympathetic at that point. They insisted it had to be bad dreams and ordered me off back to bed. So there, in the darkness, the parade would start again. And this occurred from the age of 3 until I was about 6 years old, pretty much every single night. One night, I actually managed to fall asleep and awoke to a full-figured green man with a full black beard and long black hair, and he was strangling me. Somehow, I don't know how, I managed to escape, and I ran to my parents' room and was so distraught they actually listened to me and actually checked my neck where there actually were red marks. This time, they let me crawl in bed with them for the night. Also, another time, what could be described now as an alien, a bulbous-like head and small body and short in stature, but not gray. It was yellowish and wearing a silver suit. And this thing lifted me up and walked me through the wall into a strange space where everything was dark blue, kind of like gunmetal. And the walls had these cubic and rectangular protrusions. It carried me over to a hole in the wall about 2 feet high, and it bent me over and stuck my head and the upper half of my torso from the waist up into the hole. I was stuck. I was stuck there in that bent over position, and I was terrified. It was a tight space like an MRI. And when I've had MRIs, it always reminds me of this event. Then the next thing I know, it's early morning, and I'm in bed with no trace of that entity being around at all. And then something like that never happened before or after. When I was 6 years old, I received a gift that was my prized possession, and this was none other than a transistor radio. Now, I wasn't allowed to play it at night, but I would turn it on and put it under my pillow with my ear over the speaker. And this actually stopped that nightly parade. Meanwhile, neighbors would gossip about the strange events going on in their own houses. And yes, we did also have a few strange events, but not as extreme as the neighbors. And when I was 10, while my family and I were at the movies, we came home and the house was on fire. It started in my bedroom, so we had to move. And about 15 years later, we were visiting a neighbor and close friend who still lived right across that street. She said strange events were still occurring. And about 5 years after that, we were visiting, and she told us she found out the neighborhood was built on an old cemetery and was the inspiration for the movie Poltergeist. Now, I don't know if that's true, the poltergeist part, but the cemetery part, that was definitely true. No wonder the developers would freak out when us kids used to dig 6 feet deep trenches and holes, and we just would cover them with plywood roofs. They'd yell and scream and try to chase us off, but, we always returned. But as an adult, I got a lot of jobs using a shovel. My first was at 16 years old, digging graves by hand. I've never feared the dead or cemeteries. After all, I was raised with them. Now, I lived in a house for 16 years that had interdimensional doorways. Alright, I know, just hear me out. There were strange occurrences almost daily. And one night, around 2010, I was getting ready to go to bed. I didn't have my clothes off yet, but as I sat on the edge of the bed, I heard a crash sound from the living room that connects to the bedroom. And then it was weird. I heard this animal type steps, and then a shaggy dog came into my room. It passed me and went into my adjoining bathroom and started drinking out of the toilet. I remember it. It was light brown and about 2.5 feet tall at the shoulders. I only used the back door at that time for entry and exit, but I kept a tight ship, and the backyard had a 4-foot fence with a gate. I thought, geez, I must have, left the gate and back door open, which made no sense. So I grabbed the dog by its collar from the toilet, and I kind of hunched over while walking it out of the bathroom, out of the bedroom, out of the living room, out of the kitchen, to the stairs that left to the back door. And then I saw the stairway light was off, so I turned it on. In lucid dreams, it's supposed to be hard to manipulate light. So I took notice of this, and I always left the light on. Now, the back door was closed. I looked out the back door, and the gate was closed too. In my head, I'm just thinking, weird. Really weird. Then, suddenly, the stairway wall opened up, and there was a different staircase. I know, I could not believe it. I looked up the new staircase, and there was a balustrade at the top paralleling my normal stairway. Now, behind the balustrade was a table with a man sitting at it with medium-length hair and a mustache, and he was just reading a paper. And then behind him was a woman with shoulder-length brown hair pulling a bowl or pan from a stove that was steaming. I mean, she looked at me and said, "Oh, you found our dog. Hope he didn't bother you. We're your neighbors. It's nice to meet you." Then no names were said. I let go of the dog's collar and it ran up the stairs to them. My brain is just staggering right now, but my instincts actually were calm and very aware. So I said, "Yep, no problem. Nice to meet you." And as she sat at the steaming container in front of the man on the table, he never said one word, nothing. So I turned to the left to go back up my normal stairway into the kitchen, and after 3 steps, the stairway closed. Now, through the kitchen into the living room, I noticed a metal tray had been knocked off my dining table onto the floor, explaining the initial crash I heard at the beginning. Now, going from there into the bedroom and then the bathroom, I looked and there was indeed water on the bathroom floor where the dog had been drinking. So I cleaned it up, I went into the bedroom, and I laid on the bed. And suddenly, my mind and mouth exploded out loud with a "What the was that?" And you gotta understand that there were constant, strange occurrences in this house. Many of them centered on that very stairway. Now, it never opened again visually, and I never saw the people or that dog again. So many things have happened during my 16 years of living there. I mean, I could literally write a book just about that house alone. Now, believe it or not, this was one of the least strange things that I've been through. I promise you, I'll take a lie detector test or hypnosis or whatever, but I swear to you it's true. Alright, so on September 11th, 2013, it just started raining on the Front Range in Colorado. And in 24 hours, 9 inches had soaked Boulder County. Now, by the 15th, 17 inches had fell from a dark, angry sky. And this annual rainfall for the county is usually only about 20.5 inches. So during this, 8 people died. 11,000 were evacuated, 19,000 homes were damaged severely, and 1,500 homes were totally lost. Now this created a great housing shortage, and a year later the greedy landlords doubled the rents, and by 2015 they were tripled. I lived in the same house with an interdimensional doorway for 16 years and paid $850 a month. And in 2015, after bulldozing my backyard, my landlord raised the rent to $1,400 monthly. Now, it took me years and a lot of work and money to make that yard nice, so it was time to go. But all the housing was hard to find and also very expensive. I mean, not to mention it cost $50 to $100 just to apply for another place each time. So my friend John was renting this tiny studio apartment starting at $600 a month. And 10 months later, he was paying $900. And they told him it was going up to $1,200. So he and I hunted together trying to find a place where we could actually split the rent. I mean, it made sense. Plus, I had to be out by May 1st or pay the $1,400. So after 3 months, we found the perfect place and we're going to move in 3 days when the realtor called and told us that the sewer blew up under the house and that it wasn't fit for habitation. You know, he was sorry and promised to give us first dibs on the next available unit, but we were devastated. I mean, on the 3rd day following this huge debacle, having no luck, I was praying pretty hard. Plus, 11:30 p.m. the night before I had to be out, I got a call from a patient asking if I wanted to live in the mountains. I asked, how far away from town? In this, it was in Silver Plume, 45 minutes away and at an altitude of just under 10,000 feet above sea level. But we jumped at it. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Plus, this place was awesome. Hand-built of choice wood and stone. It had 4 bedrooms, a study, a huge dining room and kitchen, plus it had a jacuzzi in one of the 2 bathrooms. It also sat on 3 acres, on top of a peak right next to the ancient Silver Plume Cemetery. Oh, did I mention there was a bear that was also living in the yard? Too cool. I mean, we were in there like swimwear. So the first thing, I set up my 400 watt guitar amp in the study, plugged my Les Paul in and started shredding. I feel someone tap me on the shoulder and I turn around and nobody's there. And the double glass doors to the study were closed. I'm like, okay, alright, stay calm. So I just keep playing away, and then suddenly a moaning voice starts coming out of the 12-inch speakers. Now this is when I'm like, oh crap. So I stop playing, and it's still moaning, this hideous wailing through the speakers. So I sat down on the couch, and looking and talking directly into the speakers, I say, look, we just moved in. I've been living in a weird house for 16 years. I don't need any more problems. Please, leave me alone. And it stopped. Except for the bear constantly dragging the downhill neighbor's trash to our yard, we weren't having any troubles. Until, that is, October rolls around, and my former drummer Lou called saying that he was ready to play again after recovering from a heart attack the year before. I was like, sweet. So we have our first practice in over a year in town at Lou's house in Denver. And at this moment, I'm like, stoked, great, let's go. So John picked me up after his workday ended, and we climbed the I-70 corridor from the 5,000 feet above sea level to the 10,000 feet above sea level. And as we go, the first snow of the year is dropping. It looks like it was raining cigarettes. So we get to the abode, and John lets his 2 pit bulls out, and we start climbing the hill where my garden was located so I could cover my plants from the snow. And on the way, we had to cross a small dry ditch about 3 feet wide and about 2 feet deep. Now, the snow had started to collect in the ditch, and I took note, it was a bit slippery. At this point, we're about 50 yards from the graves in the cemetery. So joyfully, I cover the plants and start walking back down towards the ditch, with John and the dogs about 30 feet behind me. Now, approaching the ditch, and remembering in my head it was a bit slick, I went into kind of this crouch position and started almost like duck walking like Chuck Berry, you know, with my butt about 2 feet from the ground. And I'm going through and everything is okay so far, so good. Then suddenly I felt this tremendous force belt my legs, and at the same time I felt like something grabbed me by the top of the head and the back of my neck, and up in the air I go until I'm about 10 feet high and horizontal. Now this force tips me to the left and positions me above a boulder on the other side of the ditch. Now, from the bottom of the ditch to the top of the boulder was about 5 feet. The force slams my left side rib cage down onto the boulder and then releases me. But I can't breathe. At first, I thought one of my dogs bowled me over. But when I look behind me, there's John, 30 feet away with both the dogs behind him. At first, I thought I just got the air knocked out of me. You know, like when you kind of get punched in the stomach. But I soon realized it was my left lung, and it collapsed. I couldn't talk or scream, even though the pain was unbearable. Previously, I was trained in martial arts, and I studied the Sun Chi breathing, so I focused, and I started to inflate my left lung. And it took about 10 minutes to inflate. But when it was inflated, I let out this scream that sounded like a 5-year-old girl getting her finger smashed into a car door. And no, I don't think 5-year-old girls are wimpy. I'm talking pure volume and pitch. I hope you get that picture now. I mean, the whole Silver Plume Canyon heard me. The pain was the worst in my life, and that's saying something. I mean, I've passed 3 kidney stones at home, and this was way worse. And then I looked at John, and his mouth was wide open, and the dogs were cowering right around his legs. I started crying, not from the pain, from the thought that this was going to put the band on hold again. John asked if I wanted to go to the hospital, and I said no. I'll just soak it in the hot tub and I'll be fine. So I soaked it and I prayed. And by midnight, it seemed better. So I went to bed, but the pain wouldn't let me sleep. Then at 3 a.m., I started coughing up blood. John usually got up at 4 a.m. to leave for work by 5. So I went into his room and said, "Bro, I think I'm screwed. I'm coughing up blood." So he gets ready quick, and I'm at Porter Hospital in Denver by 5 a.m. and I'm in bad shape, but they make me anyway go through security, where they found my self-carved stone pipe and handmade leather pouch, and they tell me that I can't carry it in and I must throw my pipe into the trash. I'm thinking, no way. So I try calling someone who can hold my stuff so I can go in. And remember, it's not illegal in Colorado, but there's no luck. So I'm waiting outside in this agony, and it's cold out, which made it worse, and I'm kind of just pacing at this point. And in front of the windows and the glass doors, I'm looking in and out, just pacing. And a female doctor finally sees me and asks security why I'm outside in obvious pain. And when they tell her why, she gets pissed. So they bring me in. I tell her the whole story, which, they don't believe, and they roll in the x-ray machine, and then they see 4 completely broken ribs and a half dozen fractured, plus a punctured lung. Awesome. They can't cast the ribs. They tell me to lay down for 8 weeks to 8 months until it gets better. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So John took pity on me and got me a Fire Stick TV, which was awesome. I must have looked like death because everywhere I went, people were freaked out before I even got close to them. Absolutely the worst pain ever in my life. I was mostly couch-bound for almost 4 months before I could practice with the band. And John said it looked like I was flying when it happened. Now, there were a few strange things that occurred after this, but nothing that injured me. I mean, I really think something tried to kill me or maim me. But the official story is, I slipped on ice. Also, let me know when I'm telling other people's stories like this in first person, if you want me to record them how I usually do it, or if you want me to record it like this where I just put, pictures up on the screen. Let me know in the comments right now. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed these stories. And I got a lot of stories that are about to come at you as well. Plus, I've been looking through different books, and I found a bunch of paranormal stories, so those are now going to be mixed in more and more with my true crime and my missing people stories. That way, it truly is mysterious, twisted, and paranormal. And if you're still in the mood to watch some videos right now, click here, here, here. Like I said, I really hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you later.